now I'm reviewing Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, the Ultimate Cut. Now, I've seen this film before, I've seen the Ultimate Cut before. It's a long film, it's 3 hours long, so what's it about? Let's talk about it. Basically, in the aftermath of Man of Steel, because of all the destruction and chaos that happened, Batman sees Superman as a potential threat more than an ally or a hero. So he wants to put an end to him before Superman can potentially become an enemy. So it should be noted, this is an older film, so it's going to be full spoilers all the way through. So if you haven't seen this movie, probably shouldn't watch this review. So the film starts with the opening credits sequence, which is all done in time with Batman's origin story. Why? Why are we seeing Batman's origin story? Yes, it's a cool origin story. Yes, it's probably one of the better renditions of Batman's origin story. But at the end of the day, we all know Batman's origin story. And this isn't doing anything different. It's very by the book, very typical Batman origin story. So why are we wasting what must be like 5 minutes doing this origin story? You didn't need this huge opening credit sequence. It could have done a really much quicker, easier version of it. And instead, we're wasting 5-10 minutes maybe of a 3-hour movie on something we already know that isn't adding anything at all. So, yeah. And in fact, the only thing that we really learn in this origin story here is that Batman's mother is called Martha, which is, of course, important later on. So, yeah, it feels like a waste of time. It could have been told a little differently. But, yeah. Just why? And that happens a lot in this film. There's a lot of moments that just leave you thinking, why? So, let's move on. So, Batman is typically portrayed as the world's greatest detective. He's an incredibly smart guy, he can figure things out, and yet in this film, he can't even figure out that he's being used by Lex Luthor. Now, yes, Lex Luthor is also a very smart guy, but the problem is that the Lex Luthor in this movie, not so much. His plan in this movie is very basic, very simple. He's essentially using Batman and Superman to try and get them to fight each other for his own gains. And yet Batman can't figure that out. And also, Batman, world's greatest detective, can't even be bothered to try and figure out who Superman is. He's got no interest in finding out what his actual identity is, because, you wanting to take down Superman, finding out who he is might actually be helpful. But yeah, that doesn't even come up, it doesn't even cross his mind. So yeah, that's odd. So one of the things I actually like about the Ultimate Cut of Batman v Superman is that it adds certain elements here and there that make the story less confusing and less convoluted. It does make it longer, of course, but the story now makes sense. In the actual theatrical version of Batman v Superman, there's a lot of moments where there are clearly cuts being made where at the beginning and end of scenes, which means that scenes are just happening and you've got no context or explanation as to why certain events are going on. The Ultimate Cut does fix some of that issues. So about halfway through this movie, Batman has a dream or a vision sequence in which Darkseid and his minions are coming down to Earth and basically taking over and destroying the place. The problem is that this, in retrospect, is now completely pointless. Is it? We don't know. Because, of course, they've course-corrected on this whole franchise. We don't know what the future is for Batman or Superman at this point, or if Darkseid is still going to be a thing, if this is a story element that's going to happen later down the road. But as of right now, this feels completely pointless, especially since Darkseid, not even in this movie, not mentioned in this movie either. Of course, it's mentioned in Justice League, but again, where's that storyline going? We don't know. So again, potentially a waste of screen time in what is a long film. And linking up with this is the introduction to The Flash. Probably one of the worst ways to introduce a character ever. Was this a dream sequence? Was this a vision? Did it actually happen? We don't know, because Batman wakes up from a dream sequence, sees the Flash, and then all of a sudden he wakes up again. Why would you do this? Why would you set this up? Why would you make it so confusing? Either it did happen or it didn't. We don't know, and we've never gotten an answer to this because the message that the Flash has sent Batman, never mentioned again, has no relevance at all anymore. So, yeah, what was the point in this? Also, at this point, establishing the franchise, you introduce the Flash in this way, most people probably don't even know who this person is, because we haven't seen the Flash in this franchise yet. This is the first time we're seeing him. And also, it's not even a good look at the Flash. Some people, if you don't know who the Flash is, probably don't even know that he's capable of time travel. So, yeah, a bizarre way to introduce this character. And it just doesn't make sense. And in relation to this, by introducing the Flash, the film also introduces Aquaman and Cyborg, kind of, and it all feels a little forced, a little unnecessary. Again, taking up much needed screen time. So, why introduce Aquaman? Why introduce Cyborg when they actually have no input into this film at all, really? Yes, they're relevant in Justice League, but they could have just had him getting the memory stick, saying what was on it, rather than having Wonder Woman go in, look at it, and then analysing it and saying who it is. That felt a little unnecessary. A simple line of dialogue would have sufficed. So let's talk about Martha. Yep, Batman's mom is called Martha. Yep, Superman's mom is called Martha. I kind of get what was going on here. By having Superman say Martha, it brings Batman to a stop. Right, makes sense. But Batman is the world's greatest detective, or he's supposed to be. Had he been the world's greatest detective leading up to this event, none of this fight would have happened. He would have known about Martha. He would have known he was Clark Kent. But no, this film treats Batman like he's a bit of an idiot who just doesn't care. He's only bothered about beating people up. And that's just not Batman. So yeah, it feels a little stupid, and it feels as if Zack Snyder just doesn't know who Batman is. He doesn't have a grasp on the character. And we'll get into that in a little bit later, because it's another point, a real big point, which really bothers me. But the moment's fine, I suppose. Yeah, you've just got to overlook the fact that Batman hasn't bothered to do his detective work, which is what he's known for. So, in terms of the story, there are certain elements which are hinted at, particularly relating to Lex Luthor. Is Lex Luthor crazy? Is he psychotic? Or is he just eccentric and odd or quirky? And at the same time, is he under the influence of Darkseid? I've seen that theory passed along, and it's a theory which I think there is something to in this movie. But the problem is, it's never explained. We don't know if he's under the influence of Darkseid. We don't know if he's crazy. We don't know if he's just a odd individual. So yeah, a really unusual version of Lex Luthor in this movie. I'll get into that in a bit more detail. But his whole storyline, the fact that we never find out why he's doing all this stuff, is a little odd. But ultimately, Batman v Superman, it's just a long film. Far too long, in fact. So, like, tons of things that could have been cut out. The storytelling isn't very smart at all. There are a bunch of things where, had they just went in and explained certain elements, it would have made it a much better movie. And they didn't do that. And then you've got the stuff at the end of the movie where it does become a generic CGI slugfest. So typical of superhero movies, by introducing Doomsday, who I'm not a big fan of Doomsday in the comic books or in any other version, but this version of Doomsday is just a big CGI monster. It's so bland, so generic, so boring, and yeah, the action scenes are cool, but at this point, you just don't care anymore because it's just a big monster. So let's talk about the characters a bit. Ben Affleck is Batman. I like his depiction of Batman. He's not my favourite Batman by any means, but he's alright in the role. The problem, and this is a huge problem, is Batman killing people. Batman does not kill people. In this movie, he's going around killing people left, right, and centre, doesn't even flinch, doesn't even bother. Now, I get that there are certain elements that have driven them to this point, but none of this is actually in the movie. We don't know his backstory leading up to this point, with the exception of his origins. We don't know all the bad things that have happened to him. There are certain things that are hinted at, but without them actually being there, it doesn't matter at all. So there's the whole thing that Robin might be dead in this universe. We know now that he is. But the fact that the director and writer Zack Snyder has had to come out and explain all this suggests that he hasn't done his job because it's not actually in the movie. So yeah, and the problem is the fundamental basic idea of Batman is that he's a vigilante who does not kill people. If you can't get that straight, you should not be doing a Batman movie, in my opinion. So Zack Snyder has also done an interview fairly recently where he was going on and explaining some of his decisions behind all this. And in my opinion, that interview perfectly sums up why Zack Snyder was not the right man for the job here. So yeah, Batman, killing people, not good. Henry Cavill and Amy Adams are there as Superman and Lois Lane respectively. They do a decent job, yeah. They're certainly not the main attention of this movie. By all means, this is essentially a Batman movie featuring Superman. So, yeah. they do their job pretty well, considering the amount of time and the amount of things they're given to do. For a lot of this movie, Amy Adams is kind of just there. So Gal Gadot is introduced as Wonder Woman. I think she's brilliant as Wonder Woman. I think she's really good, particularly in the movie Wonder Woman. But her introduction here, not entirely necessary. Again, trying to establish a larger franchise, I get that. But her introduction in the fight against Doomsday I thought was brilliant, particularly due to the score by Hans Zimmer. Her main theme song is really good, I think. So I liked all that moments, but she didn't need to be in quite so much of this movie, especially since she doesn't really do much until the final fight at the end. But yeah, I do like her. I do like her as Wonder Woman. So I've talked a little bit about Lex Luthor so far. Jesse Eisenberg, I think, is a good actor. I actually like his performance in this movie. I just don't like that it's Lex Luthor. In my opinion, so many screen versions of Lex Luthor have been this almost odd and quirky and kooky, like, scientist guy. Well, that's not Lex Luthor in my opinion. The Lex Luthor I like is from like the animated shows back in the 90s. And I haven't seen Smallville, so I can't judge on that one, but apparently that's a good version of Lex Luthor. So, yeah, a little disappointing that they've went for this odd, quirky Lex Luthor when, in my opinion, Lex Luthor is supposed to be really intelligent, almost quite serious in what he's doing. So, yeah, odd choice there, but I do like Jesse Eisenberg's performance. And Jeremy Irons is playing Alfred. I really like his version of Alfred. Probably one of my favourite versions of Alfred, because you so often get the stereotypical butler. So I like that we're getting a much gruffer, much more grounded and gritty Alfred in this movie. And I think Jeremy Irons does a good job, but he's not in a lot of the movie. So hopefully we do get a Batman movie eventually. I know Matt Reeves is working on one. Hopefully Jeremy Irons returns as Alfred, because I do really like him in that role. So let's end this movie by talking about the production side of things, starting with the cinematography. This is a gorgeous movie. It looks good. It's very stylish. A lot of good lighting in there. If it was a Batman film. The problem is that the cinematography just does not suit being a Superman movie. Superman, in my opinion, has to be much more colourful, much brighter. Everything's really dark, really moody, and it suits Batman really well. It just doesn't suit anyone else in the movie. There's also too much CGI. I don't like CGI when it's used this way. It makes everything look shiny and dull. It's not very... The CGI is good, it just gives the film an odd look, I think. Ultimately, the film is just too long though, and because of its length, there are pacing issues. It's slow in places, it's quick in others. It's just constantly going up and down in terms of how smooth things are going along, and it makes for a pretty odd film. So, Zack Snyder. I've got nothing against Zack Snyder. I like some of his films, particularly some of his earlier stuff like Dawn of the Dead. So, if you look at Zack Snyder's repertoire and his filmography, you'll see that all of the films in which he has really stuck closely to the original material, so Watchmen, 300, Dawn of the Dead, for example, they're good. Then all the ones where he's deviated a little from the original material, such as this one and Man of Steel, not so much. So, in my opinion, Zack Snyder, really good as a cinematographer. Not so much as a director or a storyteller. He's good when other people are telling the story and he's just making it look good. But when it actually comes to storytelling himself, not so much. So that's my review of Batman v Superman. I'm not a fan. I do think the Ultimate Cut's a little better than the theatrical cut. That's the version I'd recommend, the Ultimate Cut. But it is long, it's 3 hours long. There are tons of problems in there. And that being said, the film does have good action scenes. There are some good characters in there. There are entertaining moments in there. So I'm not completely saying this is a bad movie. I think the Ultimate Cut takes it from being a bad movie to being just okay. But ultimately, I think Man of Steel is probably a little better. That being said, I'd much rather watch this. I do think there's more entertainment to be had in this movie than Man of Steel.